A question I get asked a lot is, how do you deal with loneliness while traveling? It's a great question. First, a story.
What? There's a little baby fox.
Here I am in the woods, surrounded by snow, and it's cold. So cold. Completely free, but alone. The reality of traveling is that you spend so much of your time completely and utterly alone. And after a while, it's exhausting. This face, that's the face of somebody who's free and also fucking tired. In the book Ghost Rider, Neil Peart, after years of biking around the country, he stops to reflect on his travels. And this is one of my favorite quotes. There have been those who have actually said that they envy me, though mostly strangers, and I doubt you'd be that short-sighted or self-absorbed. This is way more freedom than anyone could ever desire and carries way more baggage than freedom can ever sustain. And I can't help but think, this is beautiful, this moment, and still way more freedom than anyone should ever desire. This one is hard. For the first few months of 2020, I'd seriously questioned my judgment and foresight. I knew that a pandemic was almost inevitable since COVID cases started skyrocketing before I left. And I knew that Japan was one of the loneliest places to visit as a foreigner. And I also knew that a cultural and language barrier would always make life exceedingly difficult in a new country. So while I was living in Kyoto, I often thought to myself, I fucked up. It might be this way for a few months or maybe even a few years, depending on how long you're willing to stick it out and how proactive you are in making friends, but it's always possible to change this, and I'll talk about some ways. First, meditate on gratitude and stay active. At least that's what I did for the first few months when I had few friends to rely on in my foreign country and I was just scared of everything. I'd run out to the Kamigawa River that cuts through the middle of Kyoto, sit on a bench by the water, and just listen to the sounds of the universe as they split my eardrums. It was peaceful, and I always felt a lot more calm, grateful afterwards. The next step is to start making friends.
Me, I'd rather disappear than be lifeless.
Now, your first instinct might be to assume that making friends as an adult is hard, and it is if you're not sticking around in a place for a long time. If you're just passing through, you can almost always assume that your friendships will be like short-lived or very surface level. If you're planning on living somewhere for a few months though, this process becomes much easier and still requires some work. Pick a local coffee shop, a hangout spot, a group, or simply live in a place with lots of people, i.e. a co-living space. For the first few months of living in Kyoto, I did that. I lived in a place called Borderless House and I had about 15 roommates. And even if I didn't get along with all of them, I naturally started striking up friendships with some of them. And then over time, we'd start to go on little roommate adventures. We'd get dinner together. I'd host steak night every now and again. Friendships naturally occur over time and with people you're in close proximity to, even if initially it isn't exactly love at first sight. Stick it out. And finally, in moments where everything feels like it's going to shit and you're incredibly lonely, just give up. There's nothing worse than forcing yourself to try and connect with people when it isn't coming naturally. It's exhausting. You'll resent yourself for it. There will almost always be moments in your journey when that happens. When I returned to Istanbul in early November last year, I had nobody. It was just me, maybe a few loose connections at a local coffee shop, and the weather also sucked. So I was depressed a lot of the time and lonely and tired, and I just thought to myself, this sucks. I can go anywhere, but this still sucks. And at some point I just thought, time to let go of any expectations that I had for what my life should look like and how I should have more friends and who I should be dating and blah, 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 blah. I just gave up. And I just called a lot of friends back home, journaled in my notebook, talked to my therapist, ran, continued meditating, and generally took in the world as it was. Eventually, that loneliness dissipated over time, and what ultimately ended up happening was something that would have been impossible to predict and to force. My roommate came back. I made some new friends with awesome people in my little part of town around Istanbul, and even friends who I'd made back like all the way in Japan moved to the house next door. So even if the first few months in Istanbul were heavy and lonely and often difficult, those feelings were quickly overshadowed by the magical nature and beauty of the rest of those months living there. Needless to say, if you're going through this process and it feels really painful and difficult, just know eventually things do get better. If you just stick it out, stick with the process, and continue to kind of fight through that loneliness, things eventually will get better. So anyway, that's just something I wanted to share in this video. I hope you found that useful and otherwise interesting. If you have any other questions about living abroad and what living abroad was like during COVID, feel free to comment below, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.
Well, I've thought this through. It's just the start of something new. Maybe we got something